Welcome, and thanks for joining us today for our 50th episode of the Restaurant Dealmaker Show, where we discuss pertinent topics regarding the food and beverage industry with industry professionals. Our co-host today is Noah Alper. Noah was born and raised in Brookline, Massachusetts, is a serial entrepreneur and the founder of Noah's Bagels, which grew from a single store location on College Avenue in Berkeley, which he opened in 1989, to the largest kosher retail store in the country, with 38 stores ranging from Seattle, Washington to Los Angeles, California. 6.5 years after opening the first store, he sold the company to Einstein Bagels for $100 million. Prior to opening Noah's, he had numerous business ventures, which included selling rustic wooden bowls through the Alper Wooden Bowl Company, opening Bread and Circus Market, which was a natural food store, which he sold to an individual who built it into the largest health food store in New England, which is eventually sold to Whole Foods. Operating Alper International, which was a housewares distribution and sales venture, and opening Holy Land Gifts, a giftware company that he sold to evangelical Christians in the United States. After selling Noah's, he opened Restaurante Raphael in Berkeley, which was a kosher pescatarian restaurant, which I had the opportunity for selling for Noah. After selling Noah's Bagels, he became the first president of the Jewish Community High School of the Bay in San Francisco, which my sister Nancy founded. Additionally, Noah has been involved in many charities and consulted with hundreds of individuals on various business matters. Noah wrote the book, Business Mensch, Timeless Wisdom for Today's Entrepreneur, which I've read and highly recommend. With over 40 years of experience and nonprofit management experience, Noah shares his wisdom as a motivational speaker. He has lectured at many places, including Google, the Commonwealth Club, JP Morgan, and Stanford University. So without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce Noah. Noah, in reviewing many articles about you and in reviewing many YouTube videos on your background, it appears that your father had a strong influence on you, as well as is the case for me with my relationship with my father. Could you discuss how your father influenced your life?
Well, we would have dinner conversations that would be very wide-ranging, everything from philosophy to world politics to ethics to charity to even some oblique references to business, although we never talked about business that much. But it was more from the ethical, philosophical standpoint that I think I learned the most from him.
Yes, and I learned a lot from my father. In fact, he had this plaque on his desk. It said, "The busiest people had the most time to do the most things." I think that was a quote from Ben Swig, the founder of the Fairmont Hotel.
Yeah.
And it was so apropos to him, and I'm sure in Noah's life and my life.
Yeah.
It is true. I mean, and my father was very well-rounded in terms of being a good support father. He was a great businessman and was very active in the community and in nonprofit organizations. And he was a real role model for me. And quite frankly, it's hard to keep up with, the pace that he maintained.
Yeah.
And,
I knew him.
yeah,
I knew
Yeah.
he was a fireball.
yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
And so very fortunate to have that kind of a father, and certainly was a role model and still is a role model to me on a daily basis.
Right.
So, Noah, what did you learn from your past business failures that contributed to your business success?
Uh, well, the one major failure was when I tried to get into the foods and then gifts from the Holy Land and sell them to evangelical Christians in America. And these things were from Israel. And what I learned from there was number one, are you doing a business or are you on some kind of, pardon the mixed metaphor, but some sort of crusade? So, making those distinctions clear that, business is business and it's sort of a charitable endeavor or a social venture is a different story. So that was a very important lesson. Um, The other thing was I didn't really understand my customers very well, and that's a real no-no in business. You need to really be inside and out. I seem to manage to offend every branch of Christianity by means of this business because I had different items for different that to me were kind of all the same, and to my customers were, would never buy that, and this one, yeah, I would like that one. So
Hmm.
there was a real learning curve in terms of what the heck I was doing, which I failed at. It taught me humility too. It taught me I'd been successful in the previous business, and I think it's a huge pitfall that many successful entrepreneurs have, is that they do something very well and then they just kind of assume that the next thing's going to just roll off the same way, and that's hardly the truth. It's always a new game every time you're doing something different. You have to really have the humility to understand that and to drill down on it and to be all over the details and the larger structures of whatever um, venture you're trying to tackle, and not assume you're just going to uh, glom onto the success you've had previously.
Got it. Yeah, it seems to make some sense. Um, in reading about your business background, I got the impression that you are a generalist and not a specialist, and you believe on focusing on what you do best, and have others take care of the other details. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Well, yeah, I can explain by way of example. When Noah's was the latest and last large venture that I was involved in, and I I think I've kind of learned that, so many things I learned from my father by example, and the way he ran his business is that he gave his employees a lot of rope and let them, make their own way, and he was not a micromanager. He recognized strengths, and he aided the individual, to master whatever they were doing with their strengths. And if there's some criticism, it would be gentle and it would be pointed and educational. But moreover, when we had 9 stores, we hired a guy who had run 500 Taco Bells in the Southwest region.
Hmm.
We had a head of production who had run a very large plant for Pepperidge Farm, that kind of thing. We had a marketing guy who was quite high up at Dunkin' Donuts, and I knew these guys knew a heck of a lot more than me.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't about to, get in their way, except when I needed to. And I think that's important because another thing my dad taught me was you can delegate, but not abnegate.
Abdicate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
abnegate.
Abnegate. What does
Yeah,
abnegate
it
mean?
means like just let it go altogether.
Okay.
You
That's a
know,
new word.
so that's an important concept that so in other words, even with a guy that had run the large production facility for Pepperidge Farm, I was the one that those bagels aren't light enough. There's not enough chew to them, etc. The sort of the QC function was something that I found myself being gravitating towards
So
because I was obsessed about quality, and I wasn't just going to let that, lie. But even there, depends on how you try to steer an employee into the direction that you want them to go
sure.
without being a bulldozer.
Sure. So was it difficult for those high-powered people running hundreds of units to sort of dumb down and focus on
Oh,
the 9 units that, you
yeah,
they had going?
yeah. No, it's a good question. No, I don't think so. They they enjoyed it. They were building something. There was stock options in the future. There was a real upside, and they knew it. And we were all a team, and a real a lot of them, it turns out, were athletes as well.
Oh,
Not necessary in business, but I think team sports is wonderful for kids. And
absolutely.
as it pertains to the business, we really felt sort of a team kind of a feel to it,
Sure.
and they responded to that.
So, like Noah, I feel that I'm a generalist in running my business. I depend on people that have expertise in the technical end and the marketing end and the finance end, and I'm just a generalist, and have a little expertise in all those areas. But I really depend on the experts in those respective fields to really do their thing. And I feel that by looking at the overview of the broad brush approach of the total operations, that serves me to be more effective in running my business. So I'm certainly a proponent of Noah's philosophy there. So Noah, how do we separate our personal lives from our business lives?
That's really hard. uh, I don't really have an answer except making a conscious effort to do it, and not just it's uh, maybe not for public broadcasting, but it was Bill Graham who said something along the lines of, and we're going to teach your audience a little Yiddish here. He said that um, business was like let's just use the word prostitute, but she sure is a good shtup. In other words, business is, for those that are into it, is a little bit of a drug. It's a little bit of a high, figuring things out and actualizing them. And the important thing is just to, you know, understand where your priorities are. Is it, 100% business, or where does the family come in? Where do personal relationships come in? And I think that people who are, solely focused on a business trajectory, over time, it becomes a kind of a limiting kind of an enjoyment, and that those pieces that people leave behind are very important. The old work life balance, which fortunately now is a lot more understood and followed than it was certainly when I was going through the entrepreneurial frame. In my case, I was able to have the Shabbat, the Sabbath off, so that was helpful. And I told them if the place burns down, call me after sundown. So
So that was
I did carve out that day, okay, but it was really literally one day because the rest of the time I came home and I was so exhausted I couldn't see straight, and I wound up feeling like my kids were. I had this realization one day that these kids of mine are they're just minor annoyances. Then I was like, wait a minute, that's a problem.
yeah.
That's a problem to look at your kids that way. So that was kind of, I'm glad I have that little epiphany, and I was able to, rein in that attitude because it was really messed up.
So were you able to go to the sports events the kids were in, if they were in sports, or the open houses at
Yeah,
school, and do all
yeah,
those kind of things?
yeah. I would make an effort to do those things. Yes, yes. And the answer is yes. It was more. I mean, I showed up. The problem was I wasn't exactly there.
Yeah.
Mentally.
Mentally, right,
Yeah,
right, right,
yeah,
right. Yeah, I have that same issue
yeah, yeah,
sometimes. Yeah.
yeah.
It's very difficult to just
Right,
delineate and
right,
cut off.
right.
Very difficult, but it's so important because the kids are only around so many
Oh,
years.
absolutely.
And I know with my older kids, I regret that I didn't spend enough time with them,
Oh, I'm the same.
building my business.
The same.
But now I go out of my way, being a grandparent, to spend
Right,
real quality time with
right,
my grandkids, and fortunately, I have the flexibility to do that.
right.
So yeah, you live and learn.
Hindsight's 2020.
Absolutely, absolutely. The Jewish word mensch means an upright, honorable, decent person. Can you summarize how your life has exemplified being a mensch? And your reputation
Well,
certainly exudes
mention
being a mensch.
something you call someone else. I don't know if I can say that that's who I am, but the way I like to define it is it's someone that does the right thing when nobody's looking.
That's a good way
Uh,
of putting it.
so that's how I see it. I think it's something that's aspirational. I think it's something you try to become, and you're not going to always be successful at it. What I fond of telling people is that you have to put on sort of like you go to play tennis and you get your racket together and your wristband and your whatever and your ready to play. I think when you go out and hit the business world, you have to put that sort of moral, ethical kind of lens on your glasses. And when things come up, be ready to know where the lines are, because they come up fast and they come up um, very in a very dramatic and tempting way. Sometime I'll give you an example. We had a guy that came in and to an executive meeting, and he was waving this a business plan of a competitor that he had somehow got his hands on.
Hmm.
And I was like, Bill, get that out of here. So we don't do business that way. Stealing people's business plans from them and then using it as ammunition. So it's that kind of thing. That would have really helped us go into the Seattle market. Knowing what our competitors had in mind, but it was just not the right thing to do, and it just hit me like that we had to get rid of it. So
Your moral conscience spoke to you.
yeah, yeah. That's a good way to put it. I think that you got to in modern day America, especially the climate we're living in, it's like survival of the fittest.
On steroids.
On steroids, and you got to remember, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I think that's very important to keep in mind all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly something my family instilled in me is that you've got to give back to people. You've got to be considerate of people.
Right.
You've got to be a mensch. You've got to do the right thing. And
Well,
sometimes it may be inconvenient to do the right thing, but
right.
it's so important to be a good person and do what's
Well,
appropriate.
I'd go even further and say, there have been some studies that people, the companies that operate ethically and treat their people well and so forth, I think more often than not do better than companies that are just cutthroat and don't think about these things. I always like to use the example of Trader Joe's. I mean, I've never been in a Trader Joe's where I haven't got a smile, a friendly word, a lot of helpfulness on the part of a part of the staff. And clearly, it's coming from the top that this is how we do business. And I think we find other examples of that throughout the business world, and it pays off.
Yeah. And I think isn't Trader Joe's they were purchased by some big German
Oh yeah,
conglomerate,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so they obviously
yeah,
practice the right
yeah. They,
philosophy from the
they
top, and it trickles
whatever it
down.
is, they've got it dialed in.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. So how important is it to enjoy what you're doing to be successful?
Uh, well, to me, it's very important. I have never been involved in any business that I didn't really, well, except for, well, with the Holy Land Gifts business, it didn't speak to me at all. What spoke to me was my attempt to do a business that was connected to Israel and had um, was going to aid the Israeli economy and so forth. These social goals, as I alluded to earlier, were my primary reason there. I wasn't attached to the products. And maybe that could have been one of the reasons that business failed. Every other business that I was involved in, I really was very pleased about, and enjoyed the things that I sold. I thought they were excellent products, and I enjoyed selling them, and I enjoyed the whole thing.
Yeah.
I I don't know any other way. I'm sure there are people that are out there selling aluminum siding, and they're looking at their paycheck and they're very happy.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fine way to. I had a guy that said to me, a guy that worked with me said at one point, they don't call it work for nothing. I mean, you know, you might enjoy what you're doing, but half the time you're doing stuff that you got to do that not necessarily so exciting or enriching or fun, but it's just part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. I know from my end, I love dealing with different types of personalities and dealing with challenges, that are put in front of me with dealing with landlords and
Hmm.
negotiating leases. and dealing with their attorneys and dealing with the buyers and sellers, and it's very challenging because there's
Mm,
so many different
mhm,
personalities and
mhm,
everybody's got different priorities, and
mhm,
so you
mhm,
got to be sort of a psychologist, and
mhm,
handling all
mhm,
these different
mhm,
types, and
mhm,
it's rewarding. It's
mhm,
enjoying.
mhm,
Sometimes it gets frustrating because you
mhm.
deal with some people that are not too nice at times, and you can't get through to them.
I think if it were too easy, it wouldn't be fun.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So there's a Yiddish word that means chutzpah, which means self-confidence, nerve, and gall.
Mm,
And played I think, an important role in your success.
mhm.
And can you explain how that has been the
Well,
case?
I think the easiest way to explain is that every business I went into, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. So I think that would qualify as chutzpah. Like, why can you go into the bagel business? You don't even know how to bake a bagel. And the truth be told is I actually baked the bagels once and they didn't come out good.
Hmm.
So that was the last time. So when people ask me about it, I just tell them, well, I knew how to sell them. I didn't know how to make them. So
That you cultivated a taste being raised with good
yeah,
bagels? Is
yeah.
that
I
it?
mean,
So you knew what the
yeah. I knew what I wanted.
Okay.
I knew what I wanted, and I knew what I was, expecting to get. Um, but I think just in general, if you want to be in business for yourself, you can't at the end of the day really rely on anybody else. You can, have staff and so forth and so on. But if you're running the organization, um, at some point you gotta go the way that you think is best, and oftentimes you don't really exactly know enough to make those decisions. As I alluded to, I went into industries that I really didn't know anything about. Um, I think it's important to learn as much as you can learn about them. Don't get me wrong. I think going to something not knowing exactly what you're doing and then being proud of it and messing up or just winging it. I think there's a difference between winging it and chutzpah. Okay, and somebody with chutzpah says, okay, well, I've got these various options, and one's high risk and one's less risk, but more. The high risk is more reward. This is less reward, but more intuitive. Those kinds of decisions, you got to make without, a manual. There's no manual telling you what to do, and I think that's chutzpah. Of just doing what you think is the best, or approach, but not exactly knowing whether it's going to work or not.
Right. No, I agree with that. There have been a lot of things in my life that I had to use chutzpah for that I was uncertain about, but thought that, with the right uh, practice, I could, make it happen. And so
Yeah.
it's definitely served me well, practicing chutzpah for sure. There's a Hebrew word called mitzvah, which means a good deed, and I believe that has been an important part of your life. Can you explain why this has been so important to you throughout your life?
Yeah. Well, a mitzvah is a good deed. It's also a set of rules of how you conduct yourself, and I think it goes back to the moral, ethical thing, um, where what's the boundaries and what am I all about? Taking care of people, being honest, uh, uh, making sure that in retirement people are doing well, helping some old person across the street. Those are all various mitzvot. Being kind to your neighbor. We got 613 of them.
Yep.
Okay, so a lot of them are kind of ancient and not so appropriate for today's world. But it's a blueprint for living, and I think it's important to be conscious of your actions and the effect on others and the effect on society. And I think that's really at the core of what a mitzvah is to do the right thing and try to improve the world. I think that's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Is in our own little human way trying to make things better.
I agree. Yeah, I think that every day I try to do something meaningful to help people, whether it be giving food to the homeless. Um, I chair a nonprofit loan committee weekly, and we give interest-free loans to people in need for all kinds of things:
That's great
fertilization,
work.
adoption,
Great work.
student loans, business loans, crisis loans. So it's so important to give back. Giving
Right.
blood regularly, doing good deeds to try to make the world a better place. I think is such an important thing, and fully
Yeah.
subscribe to what Noah has just said. So, how has your life changed since you sold Noah's?
Well, it was a long time ago. We sold the business in 1990, 7, 96 is, how many years was that? 96 to 216.
96, it's 26 and 4.
Mm,
That's 30 years.
30 years.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm
wow.
never so great in
Been
the
that long.
math. Yeah.
I
It's
can't believe in 6 years you sold a business for
yeah,
$100,000,000.
yeah,
How
yeah.
did you do that?
It was 6.5 years.
6 and a half years. How did
Okay.
you do that?
Um, we were we were in the right thing at the right time, and we executed beautifully. I mean, I'll just that's just a simple way to put it.
Yes.
Um, but we had the right people to do that. I alluded to that earlier. Real professionals. Um,
And your brother was an
yeah,
entrepreneur.
but well, that's the sort of the I think the most interesting, and I think the kind of the part of the story that I like the best is that my brother actually gave me the idea to go into the bagel
Right.
business.
I read that in your book.
Okay, he had seen bagel business in Montreal. He was very impressed. I should go into it, and it took me a long time to get there, like roughly a year. But he was a 5 years older than me, and so I at least listened to him and looked into it very carefully, and then decided to do it. And then once the first store opened, it was a tremendous success. It came on the heels of the Holy Land Gifts, which was basically, below ground, and then it was like a rocket ship, and it was whoa, just right away. It was clearly something that there was a need. I mean, I think that's part of the classic analysis you need to do when you start a business is to, is there consumer demand out there? As people are fond of saying today, where's the pain point? I don't know if it was a pain point in bagels, but maybe the pain point was that they weren't so.
The pain points and calories.
Yeah,
Right?
well,
Right?
right, right. Well, that's another story, which
Yeah.
is yes, when we started the bagel business back in '89, carbo loading was a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then what we're fond of saying is it took them 6.5 years to figure out that if you carbo load and you don't do marathons, you get fat. And by that time, we were out. But basically, after the initial success of that first store, this same brother, kind of wanted in. And had he not come into the business, I wouldn't be sitting here with you today, Steve,
For sure.
because he had the sort of Stanford Business School,
Foresight.
big picture,
Yeah.
big business
That's
kind of
great. That's
perspective.
fortunate.
And that wasn't who I was. I
Yeah.
was sort of the kosher Colonel Sanders,
Yeah, sure.
you know,
Yeah.
and so that the combination of the two of us, we talked before about the generalist specialist. I mean, what he had, what he was good at, I wasn't good at, and vice versa.
So you compliment
We
each other.
complemented each other perfectly,
That's nice.
and we even arranged things so that we kept out of each other's way, which was also important.
That's good. So was he responsible for bringing Starbucks into the mix here?
No, Starbucks came much later, and that was actually by that point we had a VC partner,
Okay.
and they actually made that happen.
I see.
But it sort of was in the works because it was happening organically, because we were co-locating serendipitously. Okay, but then we decided, boy, this would be great to be, actually merged together. In terms of to your business, a real estate acquisition.
Mhm.
Having a powerhouse like Starbucks.
Sure.
They weren't as powerful then as they are now,
Yeah.
but they were still powerful.
Right.
We could get much better deals. We could get better locations. So it really made sense. And for them, it was a perfect compliment. I think the testimony to how strong the brands were was that the busy consumer on a weekday morning would go to Starbucks for their coffee and then Noah's for their bagels. So there was a real kind of you know uh,
Synergism. Yeah,
synergism
yeah, yeah.
between the two
That's
businesses.
cool. So you sold to Einstein. So tell us
Right,
what happened after you sold, and
right,
where do you see Noah's today as far as the quality level of the product versus when you ran it, etc.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the whole sale of the business was interesting. This Einstein Brothers Bagels company came to us and wanted to acquire us. They were rolling up bagel chains across the country, independent bagel chains, and they were interested in acquiring us. And their first foray was a stock deal, and we weren't really impressed with what they were doing.
Yeah, I read that.
Okay. But we just said, no, sorry, we're not interested. At which point they told us that you better watch out because we're going to come after you. We're going to
And build
open
stores across from you.
right across
Yeah.
across the street.
Right.
Right. So we held off, and then we got an all cash offer the next year. We took it. Um, so what happened to them? Well, we were kind of right. Our intuition was right. They actually went Chapter 11 1 year later, basically 1 year after they bought us. And all these independent bagel chains that had sort of bought into their dream, got maybe 5 cents on the dollar for their investment.
Wow.
So it was really not great. And then the company's been sold uh, 2 or 3 times. Okay, it's now owned by a big German holding company
Mm.
that owns, I believe, I may be wrong about this, but I'm quite sure. Pete's Coffee is one of their brands. I think Tim Hortons in Canada is one of their brands.
Mm.
Au Bon Pain is another one of their brands. I believe. I'm not
Mhm.
positive about these things, but they own a number of retail brands.
I see.
What I would say about the stores is if you love the Einstein Noah experience, Noah's Bagels, Einstein Bagels in other parts of the country, I sold a business 30 years ago. And if you don't like the bagels at Einstein Noah conglomerate, I still sold the business 30 years ago. So
Exactly.
either
Okay.
either way, I'm off the hook. I don't want to, I have people that come to me and I hear both.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's an
So
individual matter.
how many Noah's locations are there? Yeah.
I,
You had,
I really don't know.
yeah.
When we sold the business, there were 38. We were from Seattle to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
They basically consolidated to be just Northern California, the Noah's
I see.
brand, if you will. I don't believe they're in LA, and I don't believe they're in Seattle anymore, but I may be wrong.
Mm.
I haven't really followed it.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, my sense is that talking to people that remembers the old Noahs when you owned
Yeah,
it
well,
versus the
yeah,
Noahs today, it's like
yeah.
yeah, day and night as far as the quality level.
Well, look, anytime you have a family-owned business
Sure.
with high touch, you're going to have a different
Tender
experience.
loving care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to have a different
TLC.
experience. That absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. So, no, what event or events have been most challenging in your career, and how have you dealt with those challenges?
Uh, well, the Holy Land Gifts was a big challenge because I had been very successful before that, not in anywhere near the kind of scale that Noah's was, but I had two or three exits that were successful, and then to get to a failure was really devastating. Ego wise. I
Mm.
also, at that point, either had to find another business or get a job, and I was having real trouble finding a job, and so I'm glad my brother came along and it gave me the idea.
Yes.
Um, Also, we had. At some point during the Noah's experience, we had some labor issues. Yeah, business gets big. You know, people are out there, and we were making some mistakes, and we had to think on our feet and move fast on it to correct things. We also got knocked off by one of our um, equipment suppliers.
How did that happen?
That happened basically, it's sort of another aspect of a mistake. I alluded to the fact that I really was incompetent at making bagels and didn't really want to get too involved in it because I didn't know anything about it and it wasn't my expertise. And frankly, measuring things was never my strength. And so we talked about delegation versus abnegation. I kind of abnegated that whole thing, and we let out these equipment guys kind of run wild in the back rooms of our stores.
Mm.
Okay, and in the factory to fix the equipment, to sell us more equipment, so forth. And they made overtures of coming into being a partner in the business. We really were interested in that. Lo and behold, they opened their own stores.
Oh,
And originally, they knocked us off exactly.
oh, they
I
have
mean,
your formulas,
but
the recipes.
they had the formulas, and they had the retail trade dress, which is obviously you can go in and look at it, but they just carbon copy,
Oh boy.
and it's still around. I don't know how well they're doing, but
Oh,
um, that was. It wasn't such a big deal business wise as much as it was sleazy. Like it kind of like was the example that I gave before about the business plan. They used that inside knowledge
they
but
rip you off.
to rip us off. But the other thing is, I mean, it's the strength and the weakness of America. This is competitive capitalist society. You're doing well, you're going to get imitated.
Yeah, no question.
That's it.
Yeah, no question. So, of all the accomplishments that you've had in your life, what single accomplishment stands out?
The Jewish Community High School of the Bay, which I started with Steve's sister Nancy, whose idea it was, and we've had almost 600 students graduate.
Mhm.
My two sons, in particular, and when people come and tell me that their experience was great and it changed their life, or they felt they got fabulous education, I really kind of like a soul pleasure, not a
Really,
bodily pleasure
that's
of
very
having
nice.
having given back in that sense. So that was much harder than any business I'd ever been involved in because in the nonprofit world, you get a lot of stakeholders
Oh
and
yes,
a lot of process, and I
yeah,
was never good at
they
process.
all want their 2 cents worth,
Yeah,
and then
so
some.
yeah, everybody's
Yeah,
got to get into the act. So, but the answer to the question is the high school in San
inter
Francisco. That's
interesting.
that's now 25 years old.
Right, that's great.
Yeah,
That was a real mitzvah doing
yeah,
that for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So, what advice do you have for future entrepreneurs?
Well, I'd like to say may sound a little corny, but it's sort of like, keep your head in the clouds, but your feet on the ground. Uh, is kind of like how I like to put it. In other words, dream, but make sure it's grounded in practicalities. I now spend. You talked to me about some of the things you're doing in the nonprofit realm. I'm advising both. Um, commercially for pay, and but also on pro bono basis of young entrepreneurs on the way up or starting things, early phase, and a lot of them I find my biggest asset is talking them out of it, of doing what they're going to do, because it's just too they don't have enough there to go forward with, or they don't really understand how much it's going to take to do what they want to do,
Right.
and they're better off getting a good job or doing something else. But um, you know, helping others to figure stuff out is something I really enjoy.
So, with this crazy AI situation going
Sure.
on, what advice do you give to future people, trying to seek a new career and kids in college, kids that are approaching full-time career activity. What advice would you give to
Well,
them?
what I would say with there, and I think that what's been it's always better when you after you've done something to look back on it and see what was right, what was wrong. When you're in the thick of it, it's hard to do that. But when I look back at it, what I was able to do was to sort of like we're in California here, so to use a California analogy to sort of catch the wave. You don't want to be too early, you don't want to be too late, and you got to recognize that there are waves out there that can be, very very lucrative and are really directions to pursue. We're not going to be able to get away from the whole AI influence, and I think we're at the in its infancy. At least that's what I'm learning. As powerful as it is now, it's in its infancy, and I think that the various aspects that you can learn about it and find your own way into that world. It's certainly a wave that's important to be ridden. As an example, I have a guy I'm working with now who's his niche is to he understands basically how AI works, and he's done some research and found that a lot of that whole host of businesses could really benefit from it, but they just have no idea how to plug in. And so he's trying to bridge that gap
Oh,
of going to small business and saying, look, this is how, given what you're doing, this is how AI can help you, and I can be the kind of the conduit to making that happen.
sure.
So that's an example of someone who's tried sort of found his own niche. I mean, he's I think it's important to understand that you don't necessarily have to have something big and sexy to be successful. It can be a very small. I mean, look in restaurant realty. How many companies are doing this? You've carved out a niche
Mhm.
in that area, and I think that definitely in the future, niches is the place to be because the big mainstream enterprises are increasingly consolidating.
Yes. So if someone is not AI oriented, they want a basic job, make a good income. What's your advice for them?
Well, I'm still I'm increasingly fond of it again in the not sexy department, welding, finished carpentry, HVAC, things like that. As a career, and with a lot of people, like if you can get a foothold in something that can pay the rent and pay the food and so forth, then you have time later on to start thinking about maybe something you want to do on your own. But to sort of like think, oh, I want to be everyone wants to be an entrepreneur now,
Yeah.
you know? And the truth is 90% of the businesses fail.
Yeah. Or
So,
more.
so, so better to get something that's solid and then develop an idea slowly and then go into it slowly.
For sure. For sure. So what are your plans for the future?
Well, I'm going to be 80 in December,
Yeah,
so
mazel tov.
hopefully I have a few years left. Uh, I love what I'm doing with the business advising.
Yeah, that's nice.
With the entrepreneurs and commercial ventures that I'm helping with. I really enjoy, and we do a lot of traveling and visiting with our kids and family,
That's
and
nice.
and being very active physically. We didn't really talk about that, but I think another thing that's really important, and I made this happen during Noah's era. As busy as I was, it was always like, let's go out, take a 20-minute walk, come back. You come back refreshed. This is a machine. This is a machine that needs fuel, and beyond the eating type fuel, it needs the fuel of exercise.
Absolutely.
Very, very important
It's as important. Exercise, physical exercise is important physically as to mentally,
hundred
to
percent,
mental.
100%.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah,
I do 2 hours of exercise every day, so
just
I'm a
got to
big
do it.
proponent of
Just
that.
got to do it.
Absolutely. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, Noah, what's the best way for them to do
Well,
that?
real easy. My name at Gmail, NOAHALPER at gmail.com.
Okay, that's great. Okay, Noah, I want to acknowledge you for your successful personal and business career. And you have served as a role model for everyone that has the opportunity to work with you. Your commitment to your business has resulted in providing jobs to 1,000 employees. Additionally, your continued giving back practice has strengthened hundreds of aspiring future entrepreneurs. Your commitment to this community has strengthened many charitable organizations, both in the United States and in Israel. And I'm very appreciative that everybody that has encountered you should be very appreciative of that. And you've done a real mitzvah helping people you have come in contact with. Um, so thank you very much for
You're welcome,
joining us
Steve.
today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you as well.
Pleasure
We
talking to
go back a long way
you.
now.
We do.
Okay.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
All right.
Shalom.
Shalom.
Our future Dealmaker show co-hosts for 2026 include in August, Adriano Paganini, founder of Cafe Adriano before developing the Pasta Pomodoro chain in 2019. He founded Back of the House Inc., and their growing portfolio includes distinctive brands such as La Linda, Cubita, Della Rosa, Flores, Emano, The Tailor's Son, Corsetti, Beretta, Starbelly, Wild Seed, Rad Radish, the Super Duper Chain, which has over 20 units, The Bird, which has many units, uh, Uno Dos Tacos, and After Work Bar, spanning over 40 locations. Our September co-host is Bob Freeman, who was a co-founder of Victoria Station with over 100 steakhouse boxcar restaurants throughout many parts of the country. Bob was also the founder of the California Cafe chain in California, of course, California Cafe. Bob currently owns the Buena Vista Restaurant Bar in San Francisco, which is known for introducing Irish coffee into the United States, as well as owning the famous Trident building in Sausalito, which has one of the best head-on views of San Francisco anywhere. Our October co-host is Stacy Scott. Stacy has been running a catering business called The Art of Good Taste for almost 40 years. She has catered events for many celebrities, some of which include Martha Stewart, Bruce Springsteen, Robert Plant, President Barack Obama, David Beckham, and Paris Hilton. Another future co-host will be Gary Rulli, the proprietor and executive pastry chef of Emporio Rowley in Larkspur. I want to thank you for joining us today. And if you want to get in touch with me, email me at steve@restaurantrealty.com, or I can be reached toll free at 888-995-9701. Take care of yourself and take care of others and stay well. Thank you for joining us today.